You have reached the Spencerverse, where the worlds are just a little bit weirder than you expect. I'm LJ Spencer, your author and narrator. Let's begin. The narthex had two doors on either side. The door to the north was locked, but the door to the south opened to a room with a large glass window looking into the sanctuary. I slipped inside and closed the door behind me. I wasn't sure what the room was usually used for, not being all that religious myself, but it was quiet and peaceful. If I was honest, it was the first truly peaceful place I'd been in months. I could hear the priest talking through a speaker in the ceiling, doing some sort of ritual, but the volume was turned way down so I could barely hear what he was saying. It didn't really matter, though, since the quiet of the room was soothing after the cargo hauler I came in. "Why did you come here, Jonas?" asked the voice in my head, in a honeyed voice. "You don't need the trappings of religion. You've already experienced everything you need to know." "Shut up," I whispered, trying to maintain the respectful quiet. I rubbed my eyes, which were dry and sore from the lack of sleep. Ever since the mission on Tantus 4, I'd been drifting from station to station, trying to run from both Fleet Medical and whatever it was that was now living in my head. I took a few deep breaths to steady myself, then looked up again. Instead of seeing the church, I was in the hall of the temple that the xenoarchaeologists had opened again. The being of light formed in front of me, then knelt down. "I told you. You'll do," it said in a voice both small and as large as the universe. "Why me?" I asked again. "I'm just a grunt. I'm a soldier. Why are you still in my head?" "Why not you?" the being asked. Then the temple exploded in a flash of light. I closed my eyes. When I opened them again, I was back in the quiet room of the church, staring through the window into the sanctuary. "Fuck me, not again," I exclaimed. Remembering where I was, I whispered to the cross in the room, "Sorry." Somehow I could feel amusement from the idol. I shook my head and took some deep breaths. I really, I really must be going crazy. I'm hearing voices in my head now, feeling emotions from statues. I thought to myself. Looking through the window again, I realized that whatever ritual was going on was finished and the church was now empty. Damn, I should just. I jumped as the door opened and the priest came in. He looked middle aged with salt and pepper hair, old fashioned glasses, and a sweater over his black shirt and collar. "Hello there," he said, sounding friendly. "I saw you sitting in here when we finished up, so I thought I'd come check in on you. Do you need anything? Uh, Although, if you just want some time alone, I can leave. You can stay as long as you like." The world shifted again. This time, both the priest and I were in the temple, but instead of the being of light, the priest was outlined in light. I knew somehow, instinctively, that he was a good person and that he might be able to help me. I blinked again, and we were back in the room, but the man had moved further into the room to sit next to me, carefully not touching me. "Are you all right, soldier?" he asked. "How did you know?" The priest smiled and pointed to my right shoulder. "The fleet patch on your arm." I turned and looked at my shoulder. The gold thread in the patch gleamed in the room's light. Oh, I should have taken that off a while ago. "Do you need help?" he asked again. "When I came in and asked if you wanted to be alone, you stared into space. I called out to you several times." A flashback? I put my head in my hands and scrubbed them through my hair. "Sort of. I don't know, Father. I mean, I've been treated for PTSD, but something about these flashbacks aren't that. I've been to a bunch of therapists and several different stations, but they just don't understand. All they want to do is commit me. I don't think I'm crazy, and I know what PTSD feels like. I was in the Cormoran conflict before I signed on to fleet security. This is not that. I shook my head. What's your name? He asked. Jonas, I replied. Good to meet you, Jonas. I'm Father Sean. I take it something happened on a mission recently? I nodded, taking deep breaths again. I I'm the I'm the only survivor of Tantus 4. The priest was quiet for a long moment, then just said, I see. I heard about that on the news. I shook my head again. I shouldn't have come here, I said and started to stand, my chest feeling tight with anxiety. The priest reached out and took my arm gently. The touch exploded in my mind with a bright light, stopping me in my tracks. Wait, please, he said and let go. At the very least, you can tell me your story. Then we can figure out what to do. Yes, I saw that Fleet Medical is looking for you, but unless I feel you're going to be a danger to yourself or others, I will not tell anyone else you're here. I took a vow to protect those in need, Jonas. I take that very seriously. The knot in my chest loosened a bit, and I sat down again. Okay, I breathed, more to convince myself than to answer the priest. Okay. Father Sean nodded, and the light in my mind from his touch receded. In a strange way, it almost felt like losing a friend. I just don't understand what happened to me, Father. Tell me what happened. We were on Tantus 4, I began, staring at my hands. Pretty standard security detail for university xenoarchaeologists. There were 10 of us and 6 of the scientists. 2 archaeologists, 2 biologists, a geologist, and a technician. It was supposed to be a short mission to ascertain what was on the planet and if it was safe enough to send a full scientific team. I was just one of the grunts, standing around, making sure none of the planet's predators decided to eat the scientists, keeping watch, all that. My PTSD from the war seemed better managed when I did this kind of work anyway, and I like being on the research ships better than battleships. I also got to see a lot of really cool places. I paused, playing with the cuffs of my jumpsuit. The Baranian PI had decided we'd check out this temple-like ruin first once the docks cleared us to go down, since it seemed to be in the center of what looked like an ancient city. I smiled. You should have seen it, Father. They had these towers that were a mix of plant and stone that looked as if the people had grown them. There were these swirling designs on every building. Trees and leaves actually grew out of the stone, and the geologists thought that it was on purpose. It was incredible. That sounds amazing. I'm a bit envious you got to see that, the priest said. I blinked at him in surprise. You are? He chuckled. I don't get out into the universe much. Remembering that he was a priest of a church on a remote space station, I said, Oh, yeah, I suppose not. So, the researcher decided to go to what they thought was a temple? He prompted. I nodded. It was taller than all the other buildings, and most of it was open to the elements. It was so beautiful, Father. The ceiling was so high that you could barely see where it stopped. The only reason we knew it had a roof was that there were skylights among the leaves. Strangely, there weren't any leaves on the floor, as if the leaves never fell. The scientists were ecstatic. Well, us grunts checked around as much as we could to make sure it was secure and that there were no surprise fauna. We set up guard posts around the large room, and the main room was probably as big as a football pitch, with smaller rooms around the perimeter. Most of the rooms had fallen to the elements, and I think one of the scientists said that the outer rooms weren't quite as old as the main temple. I looked through the window of the room, not really seeing the station sanctuary anymore. There were these low circular stumps around the room and a raised part at one end that had a circular pool with a large carved window above it. There was this film in between the carved pieces with different colors, but I don't think it was glass. Fascinating, I heard Father Sean say, but his voice seemed far away as I spoke. The scene replayed in front of me as if I was on Tantus 4 again and not light years away. The pool was carved like the window, and one of the archaeologists went straight for it, and I couldn't blame them since it was the centerpiece of the room. I mean, we'd scanned the pool and it was just the strange plant stone and water, nothing else. But when they touched it, the pool began to glow. The scientists went rigid. I was closest to them, so I ran over to try to pull them away from the pool, but when I touched the guy, I was thrown onto the floor, and then this being appeared. A being? I nodded. It was a being of light. It emerged from the pool and stood over me. They said, "Yes, you'll do." And I remember being surprised because they said it in standard. Then the being put its hand on my head, and my mind fell again into the vastness I'd felt then. The face of light above me smiled, although part of me wondered how I knew they were smiling. I gasped as its touch suddenly slammed me back into the room of the church on the station. My breathing was fast as I turned my head and stared into the eyes of the priest. "What did you see?" he asked quietly. "When the being touched you?" I I saw the entire universe. That that's the only way I can describe it. It was everything. For that one moment I understood it all, Father. I knew why we existed and why the planets moved, and I put my head in my hands again. And now I can barely remember last week. When I came back to reality on Tantus 4, everyone else had been turned to stone. I was the only one left alive out of 16 people. I shook my head. I ran to the shuttle and called to the ship, told them what happened. Thankfully, I had a body cam on me, but still. I looked up at the priest, pointed to myself, and asked, desperately, "Why am I still alive, Father? Why me? And why do I still hear that being's voice in my head? Am I possessed? Is it some sort of demon or something? I mean, that's why I came to a Catholic church this time. You lot are supposed to be experts in this kind of thing, right?" Tears were flowing freely down my face. I know they want to keep me in the hospital to examine me and figure out why I survived, but I couldn't stand being in that place anymore. I'm so tired, Father. I don't want to think about what happened anymore. And the doctors would just look at me with that pitying look that said they thought I was insane. I hated it. I raised my head and looked into the priest's eyes. "I know I'm not insane, Father. I know it, but I just can't explain what happened to me on that planet and why I'm still here." When I finished, the priest stayed quiet, thinking. He didn't have that pitying look at all, and for some reason I knew he actually believed me. After nearly a minute of thought, he said, "There are times, Jonas, when a person can borrow or be gifted enlightenment for a brief moment of time. It's rare, and it's difficult for the person it happens to. Buddhism basically evolved around this concept, and even for the first Buddha, enlightenment was hard to comprehend." He paused. "It's why priests and shamans and spirit workers exist. Those of us who do this work all seem some aspect of enlightenment at one point in our lives that gives us our vocation." Confused, I asked, "Are you saying I'm now a priest or something?" "I don't know, Jonas. That'll be up to you, he replied with a shrug. Just know that the hardest part for people who experience something like you went through is coming back to this world. Reality is messy and imperfect and complicated, not perfect and beautiful like what that being showed you. Some people go into deep depressions because they can't find that same beauty or feel the answers again. I took a breath. He's talking sense. How do I live with this, though? I asked. What do I do about the voice in my head? The priest dug into his pants pocket and pulled out a small, well used notebook and a small pen. He thumbed through it, read something, and then pulled out a page and wrote something down. I have a friend on Sonaria Prime named Erasmus. They let me call them that since I can't pronounce the Sarnalian name to save my life. He chuckled, then continued. Anyway, he's a shaman who specializes in helping people who have experiences similar to yours. There's a new Jesuit monastery there, too. I can send you to the monastery under the guise of a prospective initiate, which means you won't be bothered in transit. But I'm not a priest. Not now, that's true. If, after talking to Erasmus, well, as I said, that's for you to decide, but being disguised as one will get you to my shaman friend. They can help you, at the very least, control what's happening to you so that you can make more sense of what happened in your life now. But I could pay. The priest shook his head. The church makes provisions for this, and us priests have a network. When humans headed to the stars and we started meeting other peoples, there were many, like you, who experienced things beyond what they could understand. We made friends with other spiritual practitioners from other species, and after a while, the Pope and other religious leaders realized that we needed to have the means to not only send our own priests, monks, and nuns around the galaxy, but also to help seekers find their way. It's a small fleet, but it's free to clergy and seekers of any religion to use for transport. He smiled. What's interesting is that the pilots themselves are their own monastic order. But I'll let Brother Anthony tell you all about that during your journey. He loves to talk. He handed me the paper. In the morning, you go to Docking Bay 47, ask for Sister Jean. She's the captain. Tell her Father Sean sent you. And when you find Erasmus, tell them the same, and they'll take you in. The travel and accommodation on the ship won't be fancy, but it's more comfortable than a cargo hauler, and it'll get you there. I stared at the man in surprise and took the paper. He was completely serious. There was no pity, no disbelief in his eyes, and the tension I'd been carrying for months eased a little. Finally, said the voice in my head, and I felt the same. There was one thing I wanted to know, however. Why are you helping me? I asked. You could get into trouble. He scoffed. Don't worry about Fleet. Their psychologists can pound sand. Most of them couldn't see or understand a spiritual experience if it bit them. His face changed, and this time it was Father Sean who was looking at something far away. I'm helping you, Jonas, because someone helped me find peace with my own spiritual experiences a long time ago, he said. While I may not be able to teach you myself, I do know those who can, and I like to pay the universe back for the life that I have now. He turned back to me, sadness in his eyes. I wasn't always a good man, Jonas. I was tempted to ask who he was before he became a priest, but I held my tongue. He had a look that I knew all too well since I'd seen it every day since Tantus 4. Thank you, I said quietly. You're welcome, he replied. Slapping his hands on his knees, he stood and added, Well, come on then. It's almost dinner time at the rectory. You can stay here tonight, especially since I know that the first ship won't be leaving until 0600 tomorrow. And the church is closer to the docking bays than the local hostel. Brother Bob made chili. He's a pretty good cook, and chili is a specialty. The priest raised his eyebrows. It really would be a shame if you didn't have some. He makes enough to feed half the station. I laughed. The first real laugh I'd had in a very long time. Yeah, sure, I'd appreciate that. The priest nodded and gestured for me to follow. As he led me out of the room, the voice in my head, for once, was quiet.